Make him say, yeah. As we're getting ready for the night, ready for the day. It's time to break away from trying to hold on to that good person identity. It's time to break. It's time to really look at you trying to remain a good person and understanding that this excessive need to be a good person, this excessive need to validate your goodness, your worthiness, is almost always going to be projected from a space of lack. I want you to understand that. I'm going to say it one more time. Anything that you do or you seek to excessively do, that means you excessively, obsessively are inside of that space with yourself to try to project this aspect of yourself, is going to always be your greatest obstacle, because you're stuck. That's going to be, you have to remain inside of that space. It's a trauma response. One of the things as, before we get any deeper, hello, how you doing tonight? I'm Papa Lucifer Samdi. I'm your occult therapist, shadow shaman, spiritual life coach. And I want you to understand 3 things. Healing is destructive. You are deserving, but you're not entitled. And this level of honesty is going to break down that identity of you trying to remain this aspect of being a good person. Stick in. You have questions. Wait, let's get the questions. Wait to the end. I'm doing readings. The link is in my in the description. If you would like to get a reading, coming to the second half. But I want you to think about this. Anything done in the excess, as I opened up with, anything done in excess is going to always be from a statement of judgment. Every time that I said to myself, I'm a good guy, I'm a good person, I'm a good employee, I'm a good this, good that, good this, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, or I'm bad at this, bad at this, bad at this, bad at that. From either end of that, didn't matter what end I was on in the thought process that I said it, it was always going to be coming from a place of lack. It was always going to come from a place of lack. And the reason it was coming from a place of lack is because in order for me to be a good person, in order for me to be good, I'm automatically having to create. We don't get deep into this tonight. I have to create that pathway on the other end of the other point of myself and project what I believe is bad. So for me to be a good employee, let's look at the surface. For me to be a good employee, every nigga at my job got to be lazy. Everybody at my job got to be horrible, got to be lazy. They don't want to be there. None of these aspects. So I'm going to show you how you start building these glamours. So at your job, you get attention for your works. You get attention for your merits. You get attention at your job. Your inner child, your inner adolescent is satisfied. You've been wanting to prove yourself for up 10 years inside of a space. And you're using the job to prove that. What does the job represent? If I sit here and I'm talking to a client, what does the job represent? What does that relationship represent? If you go onto my YouTube channel, before we get even deeper, if you go onto my YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel, I dropped the live yesterday on Facebook and I uploaded it to my YouTube channel based on manifesting detriment and how we keep doing these things in this space. But I want you to think about this. If I'm sitting inside my space, if I keep saying it should have been this way, it could have been this way, it could have been this way if they acted right. It should have been this way. It would have been this way if they just did this, this, and this. It would have been this way if they did this, this, and this. It would have been this way if they just do this. If they just do it this way. How much of that, and we don't get deep in, we don't stab on this one. How deep is it? How much of it is it? How much have you built based on that aspect inside of that space? How much have you built within that aspect of that space? It's easy for me to say, hey, if you do this, this, and this, then you'll get this. It's easy to say that. It's easy to say that. But we're in a space right now with yourself where you're noticing that transparency is key. Vulnerability has always been key. That transparency that you so have been craving, that vulnerability that you so been craving. I want someone to be vulnerable. You're not giving that to yourself first. So think about that. Let's think about vulnerability. You have a definition of what vulnerability is. In your mind, you have a definition of what vulnerability is. And you will constantly project that outside of yourself. You will constantly project. You will constantly project your idea of what vulnerability is. If you see vulnerability as a weakness, you're going to always project it as an aspect of weakness. You're always going to push it as an aspect of someone being overly emotional, not understanding how to deal with their emotions. That's how you're going to see it. But if I start seeing vulnerability as my ultimate awareness, me being aware of myself, me being open, me being emotionally, me demonstrating emotional intelligence, now my environment's going to change based on that. I'm removing, but the first thing that got to be removed is all of the glamour. Everything when I'm looking at it, instead of me looking at things or moving into things or acting into these things with myself, is like, but I wanted to be, it should have been this way if they were just more vulnerable, or they were just more open, or they just told me the truth, or they just told me this, this, and this. For the next 21 days, whatever somebody tells you, take that shit in as true. Whatever somebody tells you, take it in as what it is. Appreciate that. Just take it in just as it is. Period. What you have to do is literally, as we're sitting inside of our shadows, welcome to shadow sessions, you literally are having to sit inside of that shadow. You haven't sat inside of it long. Last week we talked about a lot of times the reason that you try clinging to this good identity, I'm a good person, in counterbalance to somebody being a bad person or somebody not being up to par. So basically keeping yourself in a state of validation, that's what's stopping you from doing certain things that you need to do. That's what's stopping you from coming into the aspect of even understanding how you're not moving in the flow, how you can stop your own flow. I'm going to give you an example. There's something, let's say you sitting at the house, you have no money, you're in unemployment, you're not working, you're on unemployment, you're not working, you ain't got no bread, so you ain't got no money. The nigga down the street is booming. Like you know what he doing down there. But in your mind, you're sitting there saying, I can never do that. I can never make money that way. Or Ladies, shorty down the street, you know she got an OnlyFans or she a stripper, whatever it is. She doing some shit that you're feeling that is not savory, is not what a good person would do. So you staying in your pious aspect. But now, you literally went and filled out every job. You fill out a job application to all these different places. I want you to think about this. Every job that you work is going to be selling a product and or a service. It's going to be selling a product and or service. Either you become the in every job that you go to, you will become the representation of that product or that service. So by you telling yourself, just think about how, remember, your subconscious mind does not record it as what you want it to be. It records it as what it is. So every time that you sitting there telling yourself like, yo, I can never do that. Every job application that had you sitting there on phones, having to drive around, services or products, you're shutting yourself down from that. You sit literally, you're literally cutting yourself off because you have this glamour that is your obstacle. I'm a good person. No, you are responding to that's a traumatic response. It's a traumatic response. Your need to excessively validate yourself based on the things that you're able to do, it makes you, it's a trauma. You're stuck inside of that trauma response with yourself. That reason that you go to your job every single day, you complain about everybody that's at your job. When you get to the house, or you complaining about the people at your job, or you felt like you were in the right because you wouldn't hit somebody, you wouldn't fought somebody at your job, and you thought you were valid because when are you going to sit down with yourself and really ask yourself the question, how many times have I used my emotion? How long am I going to keep using this glamour of me being a good worker and me standing my ground and nobody's going to push me over? Nobody's going to stop me. Nobody's going to play me. I'm seeing everybody attacking me as disrespect. How long am I going to use this as the excuse not to sit and deal with the fact that I have a lack of emotional intelligence? But I'm good. I'm a good person. How long did you either live, and I talked about this in the videos on my YouTube channel, you either live in two spaces. Either you live in service to your ego, or you're learning to move within the aspects of your spirit, your higher self, and bringing your ego to submission to you. You're either doing it one or two ways. So everything that you're doing in this aspect down here, this is a repeat. Anyway, we'll get into that another day. But you keep doing things based on this level of you keep repeating it simply because something worked or something because this is how we confuse the subconscious. Remember, you're acting in the subconscious mind based on that feeling. You're sitting there with yourself in that space and now you're upset. Oh my God, my life is supposed to be a certain way. But you haven't created that inside of your space. You haven't created that inside of your space. You have not accepted everything that goes into play inside of that space. We can go on to, I have given this out in lectures before. If I give you if I give out I love giving out homework assignments. If you go look up everything that happened on the day that you were born, that means if there was deaths, hurricanes, whatever happened on the day that you were born, and you really sit with the fact that everything that happened on the time in the day, from the time up to and the time after you were born, all of that shit had to happen. I want you to take that thought because you're now challenging yourself to step outside of your comfort zone. Comfort is just simply reaction. I want you to step up out of it. All that shit had to happen in order for you to get here. All of that had to happen. Somebody had to die. There had to be a hurricane. There had to be a tornado. There had to be a storm. All this shit that happened just for you to get here. Just to bring you online. See, when you start thinking in this manner, this is what we mean by thinking in the, this is one aspect of you thinking in aspects of that chaos code. That you are that aspect, you are sitting in that space. But you're so used to being on that identity, being the reason, your scapegoat. You being a good person. If I start saying what I really want to say, what happens when you sit there? I want you to think about this. Everything has to keep coming into your space based on either fear or love. So now if you sit there, I just want somebody, how many times have you said this to yourself? I just want somebody that's on the same level as I am and is thinking like, and we just trying to get better. Okay. Now you get somebody, now you got all these people coming into your space and you don't like none of them coming into your space. But in reality, you ask for motherfuckers that were on your level. You ask for everybody to be on your level. Remember, everything that you get in response to what you say is going to be the feedback to show you where you are really at. And that shit, that's the honesty. That's you becoming vulnerable. That's you stepping out of that. I'm used to being I'm the go-to for everybody. I'm the go-to. I used to be the go-to for everybody. I used to be the person then I really had to start looking at why I was doing it. It was always based on attention, fear of the abandonment issues, separation anxieties, all of the aspects that were on the undertones that were pushing that current. So as long as I stayed relevant to being the good person, the identity that I created, I didn't have to go any deeper. I would not have to deal with certain things, and I could build on that. But then I would always be like, man, I don't have the feeling anymore. Why don't I feel? Why isn't this feeling happening the way that it need to happen? Why, when I want to advance, I can't keep everything? Here's some keys of when you know you're stuck within your aspect of your ego. You're afraid not to make a choice. You're on both ends of the spectrum. Either you're afraid or you think you should not have to choose, or you are always in a state of excessively choosing. If in every state that you're going into, we'll start with that one first. If in every state of yourself that you go into that space and you're like, I always will choose me. But if you're not really looking at what you're choosing about yourself, I want you really to look at this when I tell my clients, like, what are you really choosing? How long are you going to choose that you're an independent and you've done so many things? How many times are you going to choose that you are a man's man, and you're this alpha? I've already said that being an alpha, anything does not exist. It's actually one of the lowest waves. You got some climbing to do. I'm an alpha female, I'm an alpha male. Alpha is on the lowest, is one of the lowest, on the third rung. The alpha wave, the alpha mindset, being an alpha male, alpha female, that is on some 3D shit. That only exists in the animal aspects of yourself. Last time that I checked, you're supposed to be doing the work to bring your animal aspects under submission to you. But at the moment that you get to that point, now you're putting your alpha mindset into the aspects of your humanity. That's your humanity. So now your behaviors and your patterns are now going to be based on the alpha mindset, the versus something else. So you got to stay in a constant state of validation. You're now stuck within a constant state of validation. Because, yeah, that's what I am. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm bucking. That's nice. And you can get some things from that. But as you're leveling up, if I ask you the question, why What was your first time really being independent? I have clients right now in the period of time with themselves inside of a space where they're realizing that their independence was based upon masking something. And we sit with that moment. We sit with that moment of like, damn, I've been this way because it was based on me trying to prove value, prove worth, prove myself. Then go through the moments. I have they sitting there with that thought process with yourself of how long you've done it. That's usually what it boils down to. You've been sitting there inside of that space for so long, thinking everything should have went a certain way. So you created, remember, here's the key with the aspects. As long as you build from that lack mindset, you want to be a nurturer, lack thereof, or whatever it may be, whichever seat. I've talked about this before. YouTube channel, all the lectures, but I'm going to get into a quick piece. What seat are you sitting in? We always talk about masculine and feminine, but that's a seat. That's the seat. What seat are you sitting in? When you made most of your decisions, are you making your decisions from an emotional space? That means, i.e., do you make a lot of your decisions from the emotional space? That means tit for tat. That means ain't nobody gonna play me. That means nobody's gonna hurt me ever again. That a lot of those become some of those examples. Or are you making your decisions from the masculine seat? I know what it is. It should be this way. If I don't do it, nobody else will. Those are masculine aspects. That's you acting in your masculine aspect. But what seat do you sit in? It don't matter. Remember the aspect of the masculine and the feminine. Everybody has a masculine and a feminine. I'm sitting in both. I'm sitting in my shit in balance. Which one are you sitting in? That's the first thing you got to understand. Is my perception coming from my wounded emotional aspects of myself? So am I nurturing an ideal? Am I nurturing an identity? Am I nursing my identity of me being a good person? Or am I validating me being a good person? But it was me being a good person based on what I can do. So my biggest fear is what I would project into my space is somebody that can't do anything. One of my biggest fears used to be, what if I can't do something for somebody? That was the surface level aspect. What if I can't do something for someone? My truest aspect of that fear is, what if I can't do something for someone? It was, what if I find somebody that doesn't need me? What if I find someone that doesn't need nor want me? Truly doesn't need nor want on an aspect of unbiased, impartial, no ulterior motive, but desires from a space of wholeness and balance. So now that I had that idea in my mind, hold that idea in your mind. What would that person look like? That's when you're starting to do your work. Until you can define that person within inside of yourself, you're not going to get it. Because you haven't defined that within inside of you, haven't defined that as a part of yourself. So many times we keep getting stuck in the obstacles of glamours because we see something outside of us that looks the part, smells the part, looks the part, smells the part, sounds the part, tastes the part, feels the part. So it hits all of these senses. But since we're not sitting with our emotions, since we have a lack of emotional intelligence, the first thing that most people are going to say, like they wanted too much, they was doing too much. They was doing too much and they wanted too much from me. And nobody can accept me for me. I want you to sit there and be honest with yourself. You can't accept you for you. Let's be honest. Can you accept you for you? Can you accept you for you? Have you fully accepted yourself? The first stage before even accepting yourself is acknowledging. See, a lot of times we like to skip that step because acknowledging and accepting are those main A's. Acknowledging and accepting. If I'm not acknowledging true aspects and aptitudes of myself, if I'm not acknowledging these aspects of myself, these realities of myself, not from a space of glamour, not from a space of grandeur, that just because I made it, just because I've been doing it for the last 7 years, I've been doing it for the last few months, years or whatever, and it's always worked for me, that don't make that shit anymore. It's not about being right or wrong, it's just justified. Think about, remember, you're stepping out of this space of the good and the bad. Everything coming down here is based in that aspect of, is it justified? Remember, everything that happened for you to be born was made, everything that happened for you to come to where you're at was justified. Everything. Everything that brought you here was justified. So everything that go on inside of a day, let's say you went to work, there was a fight. You went to work, there was a fight. Somebody called out, somebody got drunk, somebody went to work. Your Uber was on time or your Uber was late. So you ended up getting to work late. All of that shit had to happen to justify you going to your job. All of that had to happen to justify where you're at. All that had to happen for justify to get you paid, to get you where you're at. But if I'm not sitting with my emotions, I can't sit with it. I'm used to the impulse. I'm used to being up against the wall because I'm used to this. I'm used to creating this. I'm obsessed with being up against the wall. I'm obsessed with being up in a corner. I'm obsessed with somebody always looking over my shoulder. I'm obsessed. And I didn't realize how obsessed I used to be with these types of things until I was looking at what happens when it's not there. What happens when it's not there? I'm a good worker. I work really, really hard. I'm not lazy. What happens when I don't have to do any work? I'm either gonna evolve. I'm always gonna regress. Go back to a state with myself. Go back to this one space with myself. Go back to this thought process with myself. If I'm left alone with my thoughts, I'm always going to revert back to these thoughts, my processes. I'm thinking about, even most of the time you think about aspects of how you create a space. If you're always thinking that somebody's going to do something to you, how many times has it not happened? And either it's happening somewhere inside of your space if you're not doing it. Because in your life, you have no sense of conflict resolution. You've never had a healthy conversation. So naturally inside of your space, when it comes time to have certain conversations and you're not used to having certain conversations, your way to deal with a conversation is to automatically put things in the way. Self-sabotage. So now you come into a space right now, you get into that space. I keep self-sabotaging my life. When are you going to be honest and say you were ignoring red flags to be accepted? When are you going to sit there and talk about the relationship with yourself that most of the relationships that you were in, instead of being like, I couldn't trust them or I knew I should have trusted myself, when are you going to admit to yourself that you have not been in your life because of you ignore red flags? Your trauma response is you have a self-destructive tendency. You need that self-destructive factor in your life. You need something to self-destruct. You need because in your mind, if somebody can deal with you being self-destructive, That's your definition of being vulnerable. If I get really self-destructive, in my mind, I'm being vulnerable. No, you're the fear of being exposed. That's that fear of being exposed. That's that fear of being rejected. That high emotional sense of if I have an emotional breakdown and they stay, if I have an entire emotional breakdown and they stay, then they must really love me. Because you have not dealt with and you keep trying to rewrite that day when you saw your mom break down and your dad, you saw the day you saw your mom break down and your dad left. You've been trying to reset that event in your mind, that traumatic experience. So you've been trying to reset it in every single way. You've been trying to rewrite the gift from the first time. You've been trying to rewrite what you received and rationalize it. So you got stuck in the masculine concept of rationalizing it, of grounding into it, not sitting with it. I guess it works because everybody's doing it. So you just keep reliving out the cycle. The same obstacle pops up. And you're using the fucking glamour. That's how you know you're using the glamour. You're using the glamour all the damn time. You're staying there. Yes, I'm going to hit him right here. They're going to think that I'm this, and this. How many times have you said it? I know how many times I sat there and said with myself, like, yeah, how many times have you sat there and tried to use this aspect that you know isn't you? You know at the end of the line, because at the moment that it no longer is needed, you don't use it anymore. And since you're so used, let's go back to it, since we do not have to take accountability with ourselves, the first thing that you're going to say is, well, because this isn't happening, this isn't happening, and this hasn't happened. Because you've equated time, which is just emotion, to being the stepping stone. I can't sit there inside of a space based on a glamour and say to myself of, it's been 3 years, it's been 4 years, and we're not going anywhere. What have I done? What have I done? What have I done inside of that space to nurture the space? Have I been nurturing the space? Have I been nurturing the energy within that space? No. So how would I expect anything to come from in that space? What was the conversation before I came into that space? What conversations do I have with myself in a day-to-day? All these things that you put in play to keep yourself stuck within the glamours, to keep yourself stuck within these glamours, to stay within your own obstacle. You're constantly projecting into your space the worst fucking fears of your internal all day. In order for you to prove that, I'm a protector. Remember, in order for me to prove that I'm a protector, that means from a traumatic response, my excessive need to prove that I can protect and provide, I will always create or co-create or attach to areas and spaces that are in the aspect of me needing to protect myself. To prove my excessive need to be this way. So I'll stay that's why I can't trust niggas around my chick. What the fuck I look like? Because every nigga looking at my girl like this, and this. Every nigga looking at my girl like they ain't shit. Like she easy. But in reality, as this example, I'm living out the loop from seeing my mother and how she was being treated. I'm looking at how women of my family were being treated. And since I haven't accepted the simplicity that at a point in time they made a choice, I want to see them as a victim so I can stay a victim. I can't accept that narrative. I can't accept it. I can't accept that my aunt made that choice. I can't accept that my aunt made that choice and my grandmother was like, stay your ass at the house, and she didn't want to stay at the house. I can't accept that. I don't want to accept that part of the story because it invalidates my identity. It invalidates why I'm doing what I'm doing. I can't accept that part of the story. This is where we get into the aspect when I'm always talking to clients, because one of the biggest things that my clients, people always ask, how do I begin the healing process or get through my healing process if they don't want to admit that they were whatever I'm perceiving them to be? How can I, or how you'll word it, how can I start my healing process if they can't admit that they were wrong? If they can't admit that they were toxic? If they can't admit that they should have stepped up? If they can't admit this, that, and the third? You mean, how can you start healing without them validating your need to heal? How can they validate? How can anything you do be valid if they're still over there? They're not. You're still looking to validate your reason for doing what you're doing. But the thing one of the things I always break it down to my clients is, how do you feel? How do you feel when they don't own up to it? How do you feel? Do you feel guilty? You feel rage? You feel irritable? You feel irritated? You feel anxiety? What do you feel? Thank them for that. Thank them for that feeling. Thank them for that. Because they're giving you exactly what you need. And it's that feeling. They're giving you the feeling you need to sit within inside of that space. They're giving you exactly what is required. It's not about you. I talk about this all the time. It's not about you losing the control. It's the fear of the accountability. See, as long as they're inside of the space that they're in and you don't forgive them and you keep them under that, you keep them in that, you keep them as an obstacle, you have control. As long as you keep them as an obstacle, you have control. As long as you have this falsehood of control or this glamour of control, you ain't got to take accountability. As long as you ain't got to take accountability, you can be as irrational as you want. And then hide it under what the fuck you mean? You see what the fuck I've been through? I deserve to do what I'm doing. Think about your life. Just because you can exert the energy, it's all in the aspects of it. You're living in the different layers of a trauma response. Remember, it's not good or bad. If I overwork myself for a house versus if I'm overworking myself for a house or I'm overworking myself for a chick, either way, I'm overworking myself. It does, my subconscious doesn't record it as I'm just overworking for this or that. All it sees is that I'm overworking. All my mind records is I'm overworking for something externally. The same emotions that are going, the same sensors, same brain waves, the patterns that are going off in my mind as I'm doing for that house are the same ones that go for the car. The same thing go for the chick. Regardless, same emotional impulses are going to go off. Therefore, my subconscious records it as the same. So at the end of it, I can be like, yeah, I'm a good person. But in reality, I must continue doing that. That's the only way I can keep anything. That's the only way I've trained my mind to be protective. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what, yeah. When we go into the aspects of, man, your traumas ain't that bad and all that shit, it's another aspect of validating and invalidating. When we're really looking at aspects of trauma, when I break down with my clients and I'm telling them about the aspects of the traumas, the biggest thing that we got to get into, you can be in the same house with sister, brother, cousin, stay with your grandmother, whatever it is, and all of you guys could have went through a different experience and experienced something differently. Let's use that simple example. Everybody experienced something differently. It's not necessarily the trauma itself. It is the emotional cadence in that rhythm that was activated in that space. So if I'm not sitting there with emotional intelligence, of course, that's usually where you get, but like, my life ain't supposed to be that. My life was harder than yours. Your life was harder than mine. Now you get stuck in that space of being a good person. I would never do that because I have a good heart. I'd rather be discerning than good. The ultimate point is to actually you come into a state of discernment with yourself. To be able to be ultimately accepting of what something is, as where it is, as it moves in the space that it is. That's when you're in that space of being healed with yourself. That's when you're inside of that space of really dealing with yourself. This is when you're sitting inside of that space and really doing that internal work. When I tell people about the aspects of doing your shadow work, I remember I made a video earlier on, before the end of last year, I made a whole video. I was like, the things that you need inside of your space have to change. You're building a new structure. Until you built your space, you're going to keep getting the same shit. It's your unresolved that creates your space. It's my unresolved, it's my repressed, and my suppressed memories that were creating my space. It was my repressed memories. It was the repressed thought processes that were creating my space. And this is the thing. I had to thank my repressed memories, the traumatic events. I was looking at the events with myself inside of that space, and I had to get to a point to where I could thank my traumatic experiences, because I would have not went down the process that ultimately leads me to now in the process that led me to 2002 and 3, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, where when I was going to school for my psychology and everything else, without the moments that led to those points, I cannot be sitting here in 2022 as the occult psychologist. I couldn't be sitting here being a spiritual light. I couldn't be here. I wouldn't exist inside of this space. So I had to accept everything as being justified. Everything was justified up to that point. The hardest thing when it comes to is the painful point of the traumatic experience and the events that happen is you having to come and sit to a point that you created a complex around that you're living out. A lot of times, like, you think about any traumatic experience, your ego automatically builds a cable point. That cable point around that trauma, around that fragment of your emotions, to keep that it keeps that active. Every time you go through a trauma and you have not come to the true aspects of acceptance and working on it and dealing with it as you need to do, as you dealing with it in a healthy manner, in a manner that's not based on excessive external, but it's based on internal, like it's based on learning to go through the internal process, you keep creating those behaviors and those patterns around it to protect and keep that online. So now you feel like you're getting abruptly disrespected all the time. You got to remember you created that to happen. Because you have not dealt with the disrespect that you felt that your mother received, or the disrespect that your father received, or whatever it may have been, the disrespect that you received from not standing up for yourself when you was 12 years old, sitting at the playground. The fact that your dad kicked the fact that your mom's boyfriend did what he did. Or the fact that you haven't forgiven your mother, you have not forgiven your mother for giving you up, and you didn't know that when you found out that you were adopted, or you were put in a foster care, and you kept going through horrible ass foster homes and all of those experiences, and now that you came out on the other side, on the back end, you still are trying to, everything that you're doing is to prove to your mother that if she kept me, I wasn't an accident. So everything you do is under the trauma response of an accident. If I'm not sitting with that, I created patterns to keep that aspect going. I don't get close. I don't get close to people. I don't stay in places long enough. I don't have certain conversations. When I have certain conversations, it has to be after this. The way that I feel, the way that I use love, I don't use love as its own space to go into. I use love as a tool. So I use the physical aspects of myself as a tool. So I don't understand boundaries. I rather punish people, and I call that's how I set a boundary. You shouldn't have did what the fuck you did, and that wouldn't happen. So I don't understand what a clear boundary is. All I understand is the aspect of punishment. See how you just keep creating spaces, because that's what you are inflecting. The aspects of you don't want to sit with yourself long enough to be like, I wasn't physically abused, but I was emotionally abused. I was spiritually abused. I was mentally abused. I was emotionally abused. I wasn't physically abused. Hell, like think about, go to a narrative of this obstacle of glamour. Every time that you sat there in the space, if every time you cried your fucking eyes out, and instead of somebody sitting you down and saying and explaining to you or having that conversation with you, you got a toy, you got a cookie, you got something to drink, you got something to shut up your tears. You got something to shut up your tears. You got something to shut up your crying. You are emotionally abused. Because now you're going to act out, you got to get me something to shut me up. You were emotionally abused. Since that's the way that you came up, as we get deeper into ones that have children, that aspect, I'm going to give my children everything that I did not want, that I did not have, is from a wounded perspective. So your perception of them, and you're not even seeing them as them. This is when we're deeply rooted inside of our traumas. You're not even seeing them as them anymore. You're seeing them literally as your traumas. You're literally seeing them at, oh my God, the event that happened to you when you were 11 and 12 years old, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that kept happening over and over and over again in your life. That's what, now you got a daughter, now you got a son that's 11 and 12 years old. Now they're actually acting out these actions from your traumatic experience. They're acting it out. And the first thing you're going to do is yell at them. The first thing you do is yell at them. The first thing you come at them all the time. I'm the parent, da 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 da. What do you mean? I give you everything that you need. You don't want for anything. You're carrying on the emotional abuse, the mental abuse, the emotional abuse. You're carrying it forward. You're carrying that shit forward. Now everybody's moving to that same. Now you just created your whole space that's based on that. Because if you and the father aren't together, you or the mother aren't together, there's going to be someone that's going to come into the space that's going to pick up on that. They're gonna pick up where you left off with that space. Because now, since you're learning based on punishment and not boundaries, everything you're doing is going to be based under punishment. Everything you're going to do is going to be based under that punishment wound. That attention through punishment. You should have, if you didn't do this and you didn't do that, then you would be getting this, this, and this. Now you're in a constant state of trying to prove yourself so you don't get punished. Your definition of protection. Because every time you sit inside of that space with yourself, you're staying there now because now that's the point of sinking. We're going to get deeper into these throughout the week. That's that point of sinking. Remember, the trauma that you came from and the events that happened to you, until you're sitting with them, that unresolved creates your space. And you're sitting there with yourself, you're like, wait, oh my God, why? Because you're stuck within that sequence. You're stuck within that obstacle. We're stuck within those glamours. There is no nut color on my nails. These are my natural nails. That's my natural nail color. This is my natural nail color. My shits are hype, yeah. Exactly. We stay within this space and everything and I go into this a lot. We go through that space with ourselves because we're using everything as a point of leverage. Everything from the liability or that lack mindset is to use everything as that form of leverage. Everything that I'm doing is, yeah, these are my actual nails. It's okay. Everything that we're using is from a point of like for me to stay a good person, I literally have to keep saying to myself, and I have to keep building leverage. I got to keep building up a case. Because of your traumatic experiences, become the basis of you trying to keep that case going. You're trying to keep this ongoing case. Well, because in my life, and this event happened, and I know if this happened, then this is going to happen. Everything you're doing is based on a passive narrative. Everything you're doing is going to be stuck within that. Everything you're doing within the obstacles, that obstacle of that glamour is always going to be something based on something being passive. Everything that you're doing based on the traumatic experience is usually always from a passive narrative. The trauma itself leaves you in a passive state. When you're staying in a passive state, you automatically act out in a passively aggressive manner. Now you're stuck, and every time you're doing so, oh my God, everything you're doing is going to be from a passive aggressive manner. So now you define your being passive aggressive on somebody being a narcissist. Now you're thinking based on being passive aggressive. Now everybody's sitting there as a narcissist. Now you thinking everybody's a narcissist? Everybody has a narcissistic trait? Everybody has a level of narcissist inside of them? Mine is very, very low. But it's a necessary aspect for me to understand my empathetic sense with my aspects of my senses. But you want to keep using that as your scapegoat. You want to keep using that as leverage. Because everybody in my life, if they just did all the... Think about what you keep giving yourself this same exact dialogue. And the reason that the dialogue works so well is because it syncs with that internal dialogue that you're missing. You're always going to be susceptible to somebody saying something to you and triggering you because it automatically matches that dialogue you keep telling yourself. That lackluster dialogue you keep giving to yourself to keep your glamour going. That's how, when I say anything you're doing excessively, if I'm doing it excessively, that means every single day I'm waking up to prove. If I'm waking up to prove I am a good person, the only way that I can prove that I'm a good person is that I must accept, or that's bad over there. So I'm going to state, oh, that's bad. That's not good because it does this. It doesn't. I don't like the way it is. I'm shutting myself down. Because now, and then we get deep into that aspect. That's me acting out that I'm not aware. I don't want to hold awareness to myself. I don't want to take accountability for things that I've done. I don't want to sit inside of that space with myself. Because sitting inside of that space with myself, that's what's really going to hurt me. I've been hurt in that space. I have to literally think about it like this. We are reprogramming hot and cold. You're reprogramming up and down. You're reprogramming these senses that you use based on the reason that it becomes hard for you to do certain things is because what you defined as hot and what you defined as cold. Let me look at this. So everything that I'm doing has to remain within that space. Everything that I'm doing has to remain within inside of that narrative. Everything that I do has to keep remaining on that fucking playing field. Everything that I'm doing got to remain in that space. This is when you start thinking about the traditions that you got the traditions that you're trying to maintain. My mother did it. My grandmother did it. My great-great-great-grandmother did it. They did it. They did it. So what you're saying is you're not willing to assess the law of the law of oneness. You know what I'm saying? Like, you stay within that space. You stay within that space. Let me read some of these things. When you stay inside of that space with yourself, you're like, oh my God, my life. Why? The thing when we come into this space with ourselves in that reality is really being able to sit here and sit there with yourself. Really sitting there and being like, I've done this, I'm doing this, I know what I need next. I need to sit down with myself. I need to sit down. I need to seek this aspect with myself because without it, this is why I keep ending up what I'm doing. until I stepped out of the I want to be and stay this good person narrative. I couldn't really sit with myself. I couldn't really understand. I really couldn't sit with myself. I wasn't going through any aspects of learning anything. Mm-hmm. And you sitting inside of that space with yourself is like the narrative that I'm stuck in. What narrative am I still using inside of my mind? That's where my programming is. That's where my programming is. I'm stuck with inside of this space or this programming for myself because it gives me what is necessary for me to live with inside of my space, for me to act with inside of my space. That's my definition of being a good person. I just want to be good. I just want to be happy because in my mind, in my mindset, in my mind, internally, there is no way for me to be happy. There's no way for me to be happy internally. Because of the instances that I've came from, if I change them, then I'm not myself. Who am I? You're already in the state of amnesia. Mm-hmm. They're all just a category. They're all just the category of the aspect of that identity that you create. Which identity, how long are you, I always ask this question. How long do you want to stay within the identity with yourself or this label you keep giving yourself to essential, like to keep yourself in that certain space? Why would I want to stay within this identity where I'm limiting myself? Because I'm used to the limitation. I'm still, even if you deal with the traumatic experience. I use an example. Let's say you come into, I'm spiritual, I'm thanking all of my ancestors. Ask you a question. If you're not doing the internal work, you're not dealing with your own shadow, dealing with your own aspects, then I guarantee you can go thank your grandmother, Grandma Ruthie, and great-great-grandmother for everything that they did and all those good memories. But can you also thank the uncle that was the family child molester? He was the one touching everybody in the house. He was touching all the cousins and the nieces and the nephews. Can you thank him as well? Can you forgive him for his human condition? Because this is what happens. This is a lot of time what happens when you're going back and forth. Once you release your uncle or this family member or this ancestor, the bad ancestor, from what you deemed as bad for them because it was their human condition, you're going to get access to your grandmother was an alcoholic. She just hit it very, very well. Because you've always wondered to yourself, why do I do certain things, but I feel this shame, but I hide it so well? Where did I learn that? It was already written in. Your grandmother was an alcoholic for 46 years, but you never saw your mother being you never saw your grandmother slip and stumble because she always came in and sat down first. See, as we're peeling back the layers as you're getting into your shadow, this is why I always say the shadow, this healing shit is very, very destructive. Healing is a destructive process. It lets you understand that, yeah, I'm deserving. I can say that I'm deserving, but I'm not entitled to certain things anymore. Mm-hmm. Because that's basically what it is. Like, as long as I'm still sitting in that space, not forgiving the entire space, that's all that I'm doing. So on the other end of that, I project outside of myself. That's when I keep projecting. So when we think about the aspects of projection, you've been projecting since you were born. That was your first gift. Everybody wants to talk about their spiritual gifts. Your first gift was projection. You've been projecting since you've been born. You've been using projection since you got here, since you were born. You've been creating your world since you got here. You've been trying to recreate it, but as I always say, you only can get shit from the unresolved. You were mad. You've been manifesting since you came out of the womb. You've been manifesting since you got here. You've been actively creating your space since you got here. And if I'm not dealing with these traumatic experiences or these traumatic spaces with myself, I just keep creating the same shit over and over and over again. It's not based on what it is physically. It's always the energetic underline of it. And then on top of that, think about it like this. Ever since you were born and you came down, you've been manifesting everything that you needed. But based upon the traumatic imprint of, let's say, you have a child and you're traumatic, you're trying to give them everything that you never had. Or everything that you wish that you would have had and all the attention that you wish you had. So now you sit there and you put all that into that, you put all of that and create that chaos around the child. Even though the child is naturally doing what it needs to do. So you give it its first identity. You give it its first aspects. Based off of your aspects of yourself. Think about what you keep doing. This is how we keep you created this whole life of a damn glamour, and then that shit start falling apart. Now you up, oh my God, my life, it needs to. One of the biggest things that I tell all of my clients whenever we're doing their aspects, going through their sessions, is when shit starts falling apart, sit with it. It needs to happen. But Lucy, I just had like 5 deaths in my family. Transition. What are you doing? What have you been doing? Man, I just can't take another death in the family. You're trying to rationalize it based on your old self. But if I understand death is the aspect of transition, and I know I need to transition, why am I not sitting with the emotions that are coming up about this person? Why am I not sitting with them? Why am I not sitting with these emotions? Why am I not using this as a time? Why am I not using what has been gifted to me? Because, oh shit, I think death is bad. Why am I not using the grieving process, which is literally a part of the healing process? Why have I only put it into the space of my healing process or grieving is only based on something being bad? Why do I still consider grieving being bad instead of looking at grieving as grieving is a natural process? Why can't it be a natural process? Why can't I look at this death? Because you're going to say it unconsciously anyway. They were gone too soon. I should have called them. I should have did this, and this. And as long as the emotions are there, that impulse is there, you'll do all of it for about a couple of weeks. You'll do it for a couple of days, couple of months. You might do it for a year or two. But let's get real with yourself. What if you didn't know that person at all? What if you didn't know the motherfucker at all? You didn't know them. They weren't. What if you get to a point with yourself? This is when we start understanding, really getting deep into your healing work. What happens when you get to the point where you look at your family members and you realize that they're only related to you based upon the traumatic experience? So they're only related to you based upon the traumas that you dealt with? So they're only related to you based on that space? How are you going to react then when you don't feel any type of way? How are you going to, when you don't feel, How are you going to react to that point? Is that going to make you any less of a good person, or are you using discernment? See, discernment will allow me using discernment allows me to, I had a conversation with them well before that point. I forgave them for everything that happened. I released them from the bounds that I had them under that aspect. I can walk away from it. Like, I use the example. In January of this year, my pops transition. I had my teary-eyed moment. I had my crying. I had my moment. But everybody was still stuck on everything else. But when I'm sitting inside of the space, it was different. I was like, y'all are reacting, and I know why you're reacting and why you're reacting. I know how I can understand why everybody's reacting. Because exactly. Think about what you just wrote. Think about what you just wrote. There is nothing evil. Let's get into the breakdown of my name. There is nothing evil. There's nothing evil in the personification of me. If we can use it if you want to go from every single point of an angle, it's aspect. If I was always given a certain image of it, then I'd be like, oh my God, I can't deal with that. That is. But in the natural aspects of the natural cadence, to bear, even to the aspect of when I first championed the name, using that aspect of myself, of me being Papa Lucifer Samdi, that middle aspect, that going through the entire storyline of that story. Mm-hmm. Exactly. But it's not, remember, you can't have light without darkness. The light comes from the darkness. If you look at the word, even looking at the word evil, even if you're looking at the word evil, you look at the word evil and go to it, it simply means, it's the aspect of that like the unclean, the unpolished, the untarnished, the unearthed, the stuff that hasn't been unearthed yet, the stuff that's still in the deep, in the depths. As opposed to the old definition of good, basically it was used in the aspect of invalidation. Because when you break down Lucifer to the simplest thing, it just simply means adversary. So in the naturalist form, in this context, I'm always going to be an adversary. Everything that I'm saying is meant to trigger. Everything that I'm saying is meant to make one think outside of box. Everything that I do is naturally inside of that space, forcing you to sit with yourself and go through that point. Mm-hmm. Is that like entities? Let me read this. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I believe in the higher and lower aspects of energies. The entities, how to work with the energies. I work with energy. We're working with energy right now. The entity in the lowest form is the lower states of emotion, and the entity in the highest form is the higher states of emotion. And then the multiple forms of that, the multiple aspects of that one aspect of emotion, or that energetic motion, what it becomes categorized as. In the lower states, it's the demons or the damians. Mm-hmm. They reflect. This is the thing. Everything, when we look at it from the aspects, they only magnify what is already present. That's how it feeds. When you think about the aspects of good and evil, or positive and negative, let's go out of the aspect of good and evil. Let's go into the aspects of positive and negative, because that's all it is. Positive and negative. Positive and negative aspects. There's positive things that have happened in your life that served you really no purpose. There's positive things that happen that will serve you no purpose. There has been negative things that have happened inside of your life that have been some of the most negative points in your life. We can go from, we're going to go from the biblical perspective. Remember, in every story of the aspects of myself, they said I was not created. In the lowest aspects, when you even look at the aspects, he was told to rule over hell in the Christian aspect, but he was just a warden. He was just a warden. He's the light bearer. He was just the warden. He didn't do anything. So when we're given the aspects, when we think about motherfuckers using me using my moniker as Lucifer as the light bearer, me being in that space using Lucifer as the light bearer, me being the light bearer, that means from the dark comes the light. That means I had to go into that darkness to understand all of the aspects of the energies or the entities of myself in order to raise myself back up in the aspect of being that light bearer, being that source. Adversary. It was the adversary. You have to think about it. When they talk about the aspects of him being the most hard to be understood, it's the aspects of self that when you're looking at it, you're looking at an aspect of yourself that is literally means it breaks down to being adversary in this context of this conversation. It means adversary, opposition. No. You can't take light energy and make it for yourself. That just means taking the aspects of information. When you bring stuff into that darkness from that aspect, let me go back to what I was just saying. Me sitting in the space of us right now having this conversation. This is literally a conversation of light versus dark. All of the information that you're saying right now is an example. All the example that you're saying as an example, I'm taking it in, and now I'm bringing back out. Exactly. That's what you're learning to do. That's what you're naturally doing anyway. The thing when it comes to us, your energy's naturally coming off of you anyway. I can't use an example. I cannot take your energy unless what is already present is there for me to take it. So when we think about use the aspect of an entity or something attaching to someone, the only way an entity of a lower nature or the lower frequency or vibration can connect to someone is if the thing is already present. That energy, that thought is already present. So nobody can hit you with anything from that space or that aspect until you're, oh my God, not unless it's already present. So it's like, oh my God, my life is supposed to be a certain, no. It's like if somebody be like, oh my God, the motherfuckers are narc, this. Okay. All it is your perception versus the other perception. It's going to be light versus dark. A lot of times when we go into a lot of these spaces, I love having these type of conversations because it's an actual point of understanding. Because a lot of times it's simply what we've been taught and going outside of what we've been taught. Understanding that what we've been taught and why it was given to us at a point in time. And how does that serve us? Because I can use simple example. Let's use a simple example. Right now, if I went back and I went and told my mother I need some breast milk, that wouldn't serve me any purpose. That doesn't make it any less positive that at a point in time I was breastfed, but it doesn't serve me a purpose anymore. That don't make it negative. It's still positive. It just doesn't serve me anymore. I have graduated from that point. So in learning through that point of being taken away from it, in my mind at a point in time, in that space, in that time of my life, what I was at that point in time, where it was negative, oh my God, I don't get any more breast milk or anything of that nature. It was negative, but it didn't, now it no longer serves it. Now it doesn't make it any less negative because now I'm learning. It allows me to learn something new. It allows me to evolve my space. It allows me to change it allows me to change as I'm going into that space. If it triggers me, if it's something that triggers me, then it's something of necessity. I'm not used to the necessities. No, it doesn't change it. That's the thing. It doesn't change what end of the spectrum that it's on. Once it was positive, it's always positive. It just doesn't serve me anymore. It doesn't change. Like, use an example. If you were 672, somebody was sitting there and they were 560 pounds, 570 pounds, 500 some odd 70 fucking pounds. And they had to wear stretch pants and everything, and they had to have a breathing apparatus. For them, that was a positive instance. Exactly. You're actually what serves you. But when you're looking at what serves you, there's negative aspects that used to serve you versus not serving you. There's negative things or negative aspects that happen inside of your life. Like, I'll use an example. When I was homeless, like when I had no place, when I was homeless, it was the most negative point for me, it was the most negative point in my life for where I was at in my aspects, as I can say, humanly, in that space. It was very, very negative. It happened based on negative energy. It happened because I was doing a bunch of negative shit. I was not being receptive. So I was attracting a bunch of I was attracting things that were, since I was in a negative mindset or in the lack mindset in my negative self, I was receiving everything that was the glamour or the obstacle to keep me from really dealing with what I needed to deal with. Yes, I was homeless. Yes, it was a negative time in my life. It was a bad time in my life. It was a negative time in my life. But it ultimately served, at that point in time, it didn't serve me a purpose. Me being homeless, me not having a place to stay, me wondering if I was going to eat and sleep and all of these aspects. At that point in time, it was negative because where I was at mentally, it didn't serve me any purpose. But since I can go back to that moment and sit with, damn, since I'm trying to receive, I'm in a state of reception when I sit with myself to become aware, what serves me, I got to go look at those negatives. It isn't me it's me bringing the negative to the now. See, when we go into the aspects of really doing when we're doing the shadow work, it's acknowledging our negatives. It's acknowledging our negatives at once when it didn't serve us or why it served us and why it doesn't no longer serve us. And then looking at my positives or the things that I deemed good or in the aspect of projecting and how it no longer serves me. Yeah. 1 second. Okay. Yes. Yes, you're being like that's the key. Like being aware that aspect me sitting there space like, yo, I know what I was doing at this point in time. It's not I was doing it based on being a victim. I gotta think about everything I did before that. Everything I did before now 7 years ago when I was homeless. That was 7 years ago. Everything I did before that, in my mind at that point in time was very, very positive. And the reason that I was attracting everything that I was attracting is because I was not coming into awareness of my own negatives. The life that I created, the reason that I created it, the conversations I wasn't having with myself, the traumas I wasn't dealing with, the experiences I was going through and not dealing with. All of these things were the parts of the unresolved that were creating my space. Now, inside of that space, I had a lot of shit that served me. I had that job. I had this car. I had this. I had all of these aspects. But the only way for me to keep these aspects was to keep up. The only reason I was keeping that car, that job, that relationship, and all of that nature was all under the guise of me being a good person. I finally did the work that I deserved to get to this point. So the only way that I could stay a good person was in myself, in that human perspective, was for servicing others. So every relationship was was super transactional because, as I said earlier on, it was like I needed somebody to need me. So I became the opposition of needs. So I became that opposition or that aspect of somebody needing me. But in order for somebody to need me, I needed an unresolved definition of being needed. So I already had that definition. It was the aspect, every time that I got triggered in a relationship, it was something dealing with my mother, aunts, family, my mother and my aunt, or my things of that nature. So it would trigger that. So now I'm triggered by that aspect. That's what I'm living out. Due to me not being aware of what I'm bringing into my space. It's always going to be an exchange of energy. But if I'm not aware, this is what happens. Like, if you're not aware of what you're attracting it based on some surface, like, well, I'm a good person. I can change this person. I can do this. I can do this. You're always exchanging your energy. Even to the aspects of, when we talk about that, when we get into the aspects of that sacred energy exchange, when you're exchanging your energy on that high, everything you're doing is having sex. That sacred energy exchange. Ew, that's nasty. No, every time you have a conversation, that's a fact. You're sitting inside of that space with yourself. And you're like, oh my God. Every time you're engaging with anybody in conversation, you're having a sexual experience. Could you actually go that far with yourself to become aware? That's the triggering of that vulnerability to sit within that space. That sacred energy exchange, how you exchange your energy, why you exchange your energy, what you're trying to get from it, or if you're not trying to. Every time you put a price on something, it loses value anyway. That's why you feel worthless after you do it. Anything that you put a price on, like, well, I only do this for certain people and this, if the person does this, this, and this, it's ultimately worthless. Because the moment that you don't do it, or see, you would feel, if you were doing this, this, and this, then you wouldn't feel bad. So you're sitting there, everything that you're doing, that's literally That's literally the exchange with yourself, and you're staying stuck with inside of that space because you love the obstacles that you created based on your glamour, that you created based on your identity. You got used to, right? You got used to that identity that was based upon that glamour that you keep putting on that identity. You got used to being up against that wall. You're used to that pressure. Every time I'm under pressure, I always do my best work. You wouldn't know what to do at the altitude where there was no pressure and you have to apply the pressure. When you really have to do the work to actually come up out of that space. That shit is what scares a lot of people. Remember, I say this all the time. It's not the fear of losing control that you're scared of. It's the fear of that accountability. It's that fear of that accountability. It's the fear that becoming aware is the ultimate, is that point of that you being aspects of becoming actually vulnerable. That fear of going past, imagine going past that point of exposure. Willingly going past that point of exposure. And this is one thing that I always give, I give out to my clients on a normal basis and in classes. Where you are not willing, you will naturally create a responsibility that will do it for you. Where you are not willing, you will always create an aspect, a point of responsibility that will do it for you. Where I wasn't willing to admit that I was abusing money and I didn't where I was not willing to understand that my emotional abuse led to my financial abuse is why I ended up homeless. Is why I ended up with no place to stay. The human events inside of that space where running after a chick, trying to keep this, running after a chick, not taking care of my own shit, trying to prove shit to my fathers, to my pops, trying to prove shit to family members. Those were the human narratives, the events that happened based on me not wanting to accept that through emotional abuse, me not accepting or acknowledging that I had emotional abuse, accepting why it happened, apologizing, going through the forgiveness process is the reason that my emotional intelligence, your emotional intelligence is financial intelligence, financial literacy is the byproduct of emotional intelligence. I had a low threshold of emotional intelligence. I was able to intellectualize, which came out as, I'm intellectualizing I can intellectualize. It means intellectualizing my emotion was, I got that crib, I got the car, I got the chick, I'm good. I'm happy. I can intellectualize why I needed these things. But until I was ready to sit there with myself and be like, I don't really need these things. These are attachments based on trauma, my trauma bonds. So I got to keep this glamour going up of why I do everything that I do to get to that point of that space with myself. I got to keep doing it over and over and over again. I'm going to do it over. I'm going to do this, and this. And then I can keep that identity going. But when that identity falls away, no place to stay. Don't live. I have nowhere to live. I'm realizing it wasn't just realizing that I never had a place to stay. I never had a place to stay. It wasn't just at that moment manifested me being homeless. It was accepting that I never had a place of my own. Because to have a place of my own would mean that it would not be administered or not be attracted by my identity. It would not be based on my identity. Yet, give and take, my identity didn't give it to me. When you become dependent upon your identity to get you shit, that's where you keep getting stuck. Because you're not willing to let go of the identity. You're not willing to let go of that aspect. One of my favorite questions to ask myself in the morning when I wake up, I still do it to this day. It's one of my mantras. I always ask myself, am I afraid to not exist? Am I afraid to not exist? Do I have a fear of no longer existing? I ask myself that question 5 times in the mirror when I wake up, when I'm shaving, when I'm brushing my teeth, getting myself together. Am I afraid to no longer exist? I always tell myself, nope, I am not afraid to no longer exist. I accept this day as by the end of this day, my reality has changed forever. My reality will change and I can fully accept it. Just programming that into my mind over the last couple of years has changed my entire way that I invoke and develop and move inside of a space. Just putting yourself inside of that space. Because it forces to say certain things, these certain key tones and sitting with them, it forces you no longer to make yourself be through a space of you're being generic. See, we're used to the generic aspect. We're used to the generic aspect or the glamour. I do this long enough, then I can go get this, or I do that long enough, then I'm going to go get this or this. I'll be good inside of that space. But in reality, you'll be sitting there like, not really. I just made that up because it sounded good. Because I ain't came to the point of acceptance. You're changing all that shit. Remember, change is inevitable as fuck. Your choice is what you have to make. The change is always going to be inevitable. Shit is going to change with or without you. Shit is going to move forward with or without you. But it's going to be on you. I go so hard because I'm so passionate about the transparency of it. Everything in your life is going to change. Everything in your life will change. Can you accept that? People that you used to rock with based on the traumatic experience that were family members and friends. When you really start dealing with when my clients start going through the healing process, we start going through the therapy sessions, and we're sitting there and they're like, but my life was like this for so long. And they really start sitting there with themselves and they're like, they get to that moment where an event happens in their life and they're looking at their daughter, they're looking at their son, or they're looking at their mother, they're looking at a member of their family. And they're like, I don't want this person around me. I don't want this person around me. They're triggering me. Every time they come to me, I'll be like, if you come to me for for therapy, I'll let you go for about 5 good minutes. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you rush. And then I'm going to pause you and I'm going to pause you and be like, all right, let's take 5 deep breaths real quick. Inhale, hold it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Release. All right, take it in again. I'm going to take you through that cycle. I'm going to bring you back to a center point. Because I can tell this is the point of me being a guide. I'm just here to coach you and give you the guidance. I can tell if you haven't been doing your breathing exercises. I can tell if you haven't been meditating. I can tell if you didn't finish writing the letter to yourself that I gave you. I can tell damn near everything that you do. Not only to the space of me reading your energetic field, but the aspect of reading your body language could be, I do them via video. Reading your body language, your posture, how you're sitting with yourself, I'm reading all of this as I'm looking at you. And I can, when we detail line by line, because I don't lie. But this is what we mean by every time you come into a space, every space that you created was based on a glamour. You created a space just for glamour. That's why you clean. That's when it becomes, when I really started sitting with a lot of things in my reality, I was like, the reason that I like people to do certain things or to say certain things or make me feel like I'm an adversary in the lower sense of myself was because that's how I used to feed. See, I had to understand that the only way that somebody can feed for me is if I'm already of that same neck. You can't eat of shit that ain't you. That's how niggas get sick. That's how niggas die. That's how niggas get fucked up. So the only reason that motherfuckers can feed off of me, or feed on me actually, not feed off is an actual cycle. Motherfuckers can feed on me was because I was part of that cycle. Why? Because I'd be triggered, I get tired, all of the telltale signs, sluggish, but I'm not understanding like the why. I'm not looking at why am I tired? Why am I sluggish? I wanted to write it off as, see man, these motherfuckers keep putting shit on me. There was shit over there that I have not dealt with myself yet. There's an aspect of myself, there's an aspect or a glamour or an identity that's still there that I still need that thought. The way that they think about me, I want motherfuckers to hate me. I need haters. Because haters validate that I'm doing shit right. But since we look as the human experience, outside look in, not inside look out, of course, I'm going to sit there and be like, okay, cool. That person doesn't agree with me. 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 They're all wrong. They are haters. They're coming at me. Instead of really sitting there with it and allowing myself to be aware, open, and vulnerable and sit in the space and be like, asking the question. Asking that question. Yes, this is asking that question like, maybe this, let me ask the question. Being able to sit inside of a space and being able to truly sit with inside of a space, and just because I don't, exactly as you just said that, just because I don't think that way or I don't think on that, I'm not in that space of thought, doesn't mean I can't openly accept it. Just because I'm accepting it doesn't mean I have to partake in it. I know a lot of motherfuckers that I knew, like when I was during one time when I was homeless, I met a lot of alcoholics and fucking heroin addicts and crackheads. That shit was normal for me because before, when I was going into college and all that shit, I saw that shit there anyway. So it was what they were saying, their conversation, what we were speaking, like the conversation that I've had more conversations. I've had more enlightening, in darkening conversations with a crackhead or somebody that's on that shit. That's the best way. That's the only way I'm gonna put it. They were on that shit, and I'm sitting there with that person, like, damn, like I can have a conversation with them and like understand what they're saying, and it was different because I wasn't looking at them as I'm not looking at them based on their human condition. I'm not looking at them based on their human condition. I can look at them for what they are inside of that space, listen to them with inside of that space, but I don't have to. The thing that gets a lot of us stuck is I won't listen to that because I don't want to partake. I can't partake of that thought process. That's going to bring my thought process down. That's going to make me seem less of where I'm at. If I'm truly where I say that I'm at then nothing can bring me away from that space. That's the trigger. The only reason that you're either going to, you go to a point when you're coming into your healing work, you're going to go from a point of being triggered by everything to actively seeking triggers. And that's where you look at some people in the aspects of when they awake and they become conscious. Now you looking actively for triggers. So you got stuck in being whatever organization you wanted to be, or you needed an adversary. So you still haven't sat with it. So now you're looking for triggers to stay distracted. Then you go into a space to where you're like, you see it as what it is inside of that space. You're looking at everything inside of that space. Because in every space with them, it's a learning experience. We're looking at people that are stuck within that paradigm of thought with themselves. It's actually easier for me to sit in that space and just watch it. But like, damn, for me, it becomes a lot of it without invalidating myself, being so, I have no bias. I can't move from impartial or biased thought processes. So if I like use an example, if I see a dude talking about that, still talking about an aspect of racism doesn't, in my mindset, where I'm at with myself, understanding the basis of what it is and understanding that if it's hitting me, then I need to exalt that shit. I need to raise that shit up to a higher frequency of thought for myself to actually look at what it is. From the lower state of it, it's fear-based, the aspects of fear, to self-preservation. All it is self-preserving. In the lower state of self based on a bias. Nigga, good job. I would have done, if I was it, I have to be able to see myself in that position. Can I see myself doing this shit? If no, why not? If yes, why? If yes, why? What's the answer to my yes? If no, what's the answer to my no? That's the answer I'm looking for. Because if I can't see myself go past a certain point, I'm going to program a limitation in. That limitation automatically comes back to me. I'm a good person, so I would never do certain things of that nature. They did what was necessary for them to survive. Let's go back to the first thing that I said. If I keep shutting myself down, not from the actual process, but from understanding where I'm at with my aspects of energy, where I'm at. From that aspect. If I really can't sit there with that, no matter what it is, and say like, damn, that, and turn that shit around and be like, I'm in the right space. I gotta be, because that's a sign. I'm not looking for something generic. If right now, use an example, I had somebody reached out to me today. Somebody reached out to me and was talking about, yo, would you do an interview? Would you do a interview or things of that nature? I was like, I do it. And it was crazy because during my self-reflection time, this is also how we start to understand how you start manifesting things. During my self-reflection time, before when I started self-reflecting, I would be asking myself a series of questions, answering my questions. As I got more comfortable with my self-reflection moments, it became more of an interview, because that's all you're doing is interviewing yourself. So it was crazy that this morning when I woke up, I was going through my normal interview with myself, interviewing myself in the mirror, interviewing myself during my meditation, going through my normal interviews, like I'm sitting inside the space and we having a whole conversation to myself. And then somebody hits me up and asks like, yo, would you do an interview? Do you ever thought about talking about this on that space? And I was like, I've thought about it because I have an interview with myself every day anyway. And they were like, then what they said after that was exactly what I would say to myself at the end of my interview. Like my gratitude or me thanking, giving myself that boost to myself of where I'm at. It was like they said my ending to what I said. So everything that I'm doing is just, now I'm in the state of everything is justified. Whatever comes up inside of that space, the stuff that you need to work on. This when we start looking at, this what I mean about looking at these certain aspects. Like if you sat here right now and if you told me your favorite thing to do in the whole entire wide world, you wanted to be a fucking chef, you wanted to be a cook, you wanted to be an actor, you wanted to be a business owner. The first thing I'm going to ask you is what's stopping you from doing it right now? You want to be an actor. What's stopping you from being an actor right now? I don't have a camera, and I'm not really good at acting, and you got a camera sitting in your hand right now as your camera phone. You got your phone right here. Right now, got a whole phone. So what's stopping you from recording yourself? Man, what if I'm not that good? What? You've never done it before. Why would you put this falsehood of expectation on yourself of something that you've never done? How do you know? Why would it hurt for you to sit there? Oh, this is why what would it take you to sit there for 5 to 10 minutes and record yourself? And go through all of the feelings. Please go through all of the emotions. Hit that camera, let it just play, go through the nervousness and the jumpiness and the anxiousness. Sit with it. Allow yourself to face it, face head on. Until you become comfortable. I was not always one that can sit in front. I was definitely not one to sit in front of a camera, let alone speak to people, let alone be able to have conversations and pay attention to look at what somebody's saying if they're asking me questions and actually have a dialogue. I definitely wasn't able to do these things, but everything that I had to do to get to this point was necessary. I had to remove a lot of those old glamours. I was used to, my thought process would, if you would have came to me, I always said it, if 8 years ago you said, yo, you're going to be talking, you're going to be speaking to people, you're going to be teaching, you're going to be providing therapy, you're going to be counseling people, you're going to be doing all of these things. Man, what the fuck you mean? Nah, nigga, I don't think I'm gonna be doing that. You're sitting inside of that space. I bared light. We bared light today. We bear light. I bear light to you. I'm the light bearer. That information or knowledge. Sitting in that space with myself, I know that I needed to. So now I can sit with myself and ultimately owning the aspects of the trauma. I need the traumatic experience. That's all that it was. It was something to unlock something. I can't keep putting things into the old space because I can't apply it. I can't move into a certain space because I can't apply to it, because that's going to take me outside of my comfort zone. The thing that I let everybody know about the aspects of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is reaction. Comfort is simply reaction. Your ability to react to a situation. That is comfort. Whether it is something bad happened or something good happened. Whether you looked on the news and whether you looked on the news and you saw a cat being adopted, or you looked on the news and you saw a little kid get a little kid in the same space get taken away. Either way, you're being triggered based in your comfort zone. Because the first thing you're going to say to yourself is, See, that wouldn't happen. That never happens in my neighborhood because we're good. Where are all the good people at? Where are all the good people at? Because that's what you're going to validate based on being bad. It's being able to sit past. Why is that triggering you? Why did it disappoint you? Why is it making you mad? Why is it making you feel some type of way? That's your first answer. That's the first answer that you're looking for. You simply coming here despite your deeply rooted feelings about my name. You cannot deny that you are learning something. Took you outside of your comfort zone. Made you feel all types of ways. We were engaged in a conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I was homeless, I didn't believe I was homeless. I didn't believe I was homeless. Like the craziest part about me going through the earlier aspects of my shadow work, craziest shit about me going through the process of my earlier processes of shadow work, especially while I was going through my homeless phase, was I didn't believe that I was homeless. Like nothing in my mind would let me believe that I was homeless. Nothing in my mind would allow me to believe that I was homeless. I could not believe it. But before we get out of here, I'm opening up the floor for questions, for readings. If you have looked at the top of up at the top of all of these magical and mystical, maybe I should pin that. Do I know how to pin things? Let's see. Let's learn how to pin things today, guys, together. Yeah, let's do this. Can I pin this? I don't know how this works. Yeah. Can I pin it? No, I don't know how to do that. Whatever. All right, go down. I don't know how to do comments anyway. All right, cool back. But where we're at right now, I'm opening up the floor to donate. Ignore that $20 thing in the top, in the aspect. I don't know how to do comments. Oh, shit. But we are opening up to... No, what the fuck is that? Oh, I can do voice effects. There's so many things I can't understand with myself. Oh. No. Why are you doing that? Why are you being weird? Don't be weird. Putting it down here, right here. Right here. Clip tray. That's not it. Yeah, there it is. Let's put the linky link. All right, cool. I did it. Yay. Did I do it? Yeah. Sitting in this point right now inside of the space. I'm going to do a collective. I'm going to do a collective reading. I appreciate everybody for stopping through. I love us going through these bills. I love us learning, ultimately to the aspects of learning, taking ourselves to that next level. I'm going to do a nice little collective. If you would like your own personal reading, done live, it is a donation-based reading. The donations start at $5, $5 and above on the donations. And we can get your reading knocked out, but I'm going to do a nice collective reading. If the reading resonates with you, that's another thing when it comes into taking in energy, and I want to tell people this right now. Stop pushing away all energy, because you have to remember, this is what I was talking about, earlier. There's things that I've done that was negative as shit. I know there's shit that I've done that was not unsavory. I was in a bad place. I was in a lower state of myself. So when I call energy back to me, when I call my energy back to me, I'm calling back all of my energy. I'm calling back all of my energy that I've ever used. Whenever somebody is sending negative energy my way and it's hitting me upside the head, I'm going to thank them for it. I'm going to thank them regardless, because that energy, if it takes and it comes and it hits me, it's only going to go to something, it's only going to hit an emotional point with myself that I have not yet worked on. That's like if somebody tried to put a negative, that's like if somebody, use an example, like if somebody had said some ill ass shit about me to a friend of mine, and then the friend brought it to me. Back in the day for me, I would be like, yo, so what did you say? I don't even say that anymore. I'd be like, thank you. Like, thanks. Thanks. Oh, thanks. Thanks for bringing that to me. Thanks for bringing that to me. Because it naturally lets me know where my ego's at. If my ego is still, if I'm still playing out a certain role inside of that space. Naturally inside of that space, if they said something to that person, they're always going to lead with what they are based on the identity to keep me into that space. So I'm sitting in that space and they hit me with that and they tell me like, all right, cool, bet. All the thing I'm asking them is like, so, okay. The only thing they're going to ask me is like, why aren't you upset about it? Why aren't you mad about it? Why would I be? See, one of the things that I had to learn for myself was walking away of stop trying to prove myself to every damn body. Remember I was trying to prove myself? Remember you try to prove yourself to be a good person? You out there with every other person trying to find every reason to make yourself good. So if somebody talks something bad about you and I was the one that would go try to go fight somebody or go voice my opinion, that ain't me no more. Why? I can think some ill ass shit in my damn head. That don't mean I'm gonna take it away. I'm gonna use that. I'm like, I can create it in my mind and think of some wild ass scenario, because this is where I'm the master at. If I'm not mastering this, I'm gonna allow that to master my shit for me. Give it to me. Let me feed let me get that energy off you. Let me get that up off you. You don't know how to use it. You want to use it up. I know how to transmute that shit. As you are learning to become that ultimate aspect of yourself, that's how the shit change. You're changing the cards, which goes into the first card. Let me break down real shortly. Everybody that has never had a reading from me or understand how I do readings. The cards illustrate the energy of the space. I don't need the cards. I use the cards to make the illustrations. The first card is the Ten of Swords. The Ten of Swords represents that ending of that pressure. The unveiling or the coming from under that pressure. Coming from up under that weight. Coming from up under that, you're now at the dead end of that cycle where a lot of pressure is being relieved. So a lot of those wounds are coming to the surface for you. A lot of those wounds and those deeply regressed points. You inside of a point right now where that's coming to the point to take you into the new aspects of your journey. See, there's a thing about your journey. It's a thing about your path. Your path is not based on, remember, think about this. Move by faith and not sight. Faith without works is dead. Your path is based on your work. Your work is based on how you're allowing yourself to sit in that space and feel. You're not doing this shit based on the old sight. You're not in this space doing it based off of trying to remain with the old captions that you've used for your life. Those old captions, the old ideas, the old aspects. You're now stepping fully into those aspects. Got another 10 on there. That smoke screen of those decisions that you got stuck with. As we sitting in we sitting in shadows tonight. That 10 of Wands represents that crossing and coming to the end of you being locked up. You're being bound to that old way. Your journey is only going to benefit you if you allow yourself to be unbound by the old ways the old ways of what you were taught. It's now you're coming into a space where it's time to question, and you're questioning everything. You're openly questioning everything. You're looking at everything with aspects of what's on top of your heart. Everything that's putting that pressure on that heart space. That's the thing that you fear. You fear that heart space. You fear your heart space becoming too open. Every time you open up your heart space, every time you open yourself up to a new path, now you ain't got a lot of, that's the thing that you've been battling. That's the thing that you're seeing right now. That's the thing that you're seeing right now. It's always been, oh my God, I always put my heart into things, and every time I put my heart into it, it hurts. So I stopped putting my heart into things. So you went for a while not putting your heart all the way into things. Your heart is the aspects of your passion. So you weren't putting your heart into it because you used your heart as a point of service. You used your heart as a point of service. This is how I'm serving people. This is what I'm giving to people. This is my point of giving people this aspect. So I'm going to serve them this way. I'm going to give them my heart based on this. That goes into the aspects of that transaction, that transition, the aspects of that moon that invested into that change. It's time for you to look at and really start sitting with that normal cadence. Your normal cadence used to be inside that space with yourself was every time you put your heart into something, or you wore your heart on your sleeve, or you loved too hard, or you gave too much. Now you giving too little. Now you realizing that now that you giving too little, you still getting the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you gave a lot or you gave a little. It doesn't matter if you gave under good intentions or you gave under, whether you gave an excessive for the good intention or you gave to see how somebody was going to feel. Everything you did, you had an ulterior motive. Simple and plain. Your ulterior motive is what's been reflecting inside of your space. It's time to assess and take accountability that you've been the one that's had the ulterior motive. You, as much as the people, the place, the thing had an ulterior motive that you keep wanting to bring up to you got an ulterior motive. As much as you're able to notice it because you had one. It's okay. Remember, it's not bad. It's that you had one. You have to accept that you had an ulterior motive. That's why you stuck so hard. That's why it hurt your heart so much. This goes into the aspects of that Six of Cups. That Six of Cups represents the convictions. The way that you built up your entire reality was based on trying to maintain or sustain your old convictions. Your old convictions are coming in. Your old convictions were your glamours. You used your convictions or others' convictions to build upon to make your glamours. But now that you're now that you're dealing with a lot of the undertones, your traumas and aspects of that nature in that space, now that you're dealing with those things, you're like, wait, my life is not, why is my life not that? I can't use it anymore. You can't use the excuse that now you can't keep using the excuse of niggas is low vibrational and bitches is low vibrational now, because what does that say? Now you're inside of that space where what does that say about you? Something inside of you, you haven't rose. There's an aspect of you have not exalted. You have not rose that aspect up. Your idea about sex, even though you've intellectualized it. I got a high sex drive. Let's use that as an example. I got a high sex drive. Do you have a high sex drive or do you have a high appetite? You have a repressive appetite. Because if I have a high drive, that means I seek a different level of, I'm always in the seeking. I'm automatically have a different level of direction with myself. I have a different level of direction whenever I move. If I have a truly me being in the aspect of what I am, I have a high drive. That means I have a high sense of direction, a high aspect. But my appetite is not on that, it's not in the low state. I'm not eating, my appetite's not based on to eat just to eat, feed just to feed, get it just to get the feeling. My appetite is based on that aspect of quality, is in the aspects of my higher narrative. So everything that I do, so now my appetite matches my drive because everything that I do based on how I feed naturally is based on my appetite. So I don't have to worry about trying to hoard my energy or store so much energy. My whole goal is to be empty as fuck. My old convictions was to hold everything in, to hoard the information, have a false sense of control, have that aspect with myself. My new conviction, I'm letting this shit go. You can get, if you ask the question, you get access. Everybody's level of access. So now in building that, and I've talked about this before in my lectures, in me building the space, this is how you can access me. Through here. If you want to access me and go further, you want to book a reading, book a service, book a consultation, book therapy services, any of my other services, you can go to the top link in my bio and you can book a service. You can book some time. You can hit me inside of my DM. My level of access to my energy, I've created the new boundaries. I'm not moving based on my old convictions was based on extremism. So it was based on punishment. See how that works? Me being a good person, anybody not being good to me automatically got punished. You don't deserve to see me. You don't deserve to touch me. You don't deserve to be around me because you ain't doing what I'm telling you you need to do. That was my old conviction. That was the old aspect of your conviction. You out there trying to punish people on old convictions. That's causing you in a disharmonious ass spot. You see these 2 cups? You see the 3 cups? You're still trying to be fed. There's an aspect of you still trying to be fed from what's below you. You're trying to get everything. You're trying to get all of it. You're trying to still feed from all areas. One of these got to go away. One of these you're going to have to sit with and realize if I want to get to the higher aspects of myself, I have to let go of this. I have to assess and learn that my old convictions are the only thing that this is based on. Everything that I got from this was based on my old convictions. I can't keep feeding the same. I can't keep feeding the same exact way. I can't keep going outside and asking the same amount of questions to everybody and be like, all right, cool. Whoever answers these questions or makes me feel this type of way, then they get access to me. Yay. Because all you're doing is reconditioning. Remember, I'm always talking about the difference between relearning and reconditioning. There's a difference between relearning and reconditioning. If every time you do something, the first thing your mind goes to is invalidating something to validate yourself, you're in a state of reconditioning. You're trying to recondition yourself. When you go into a state of relearning yourself, that's when it gets ugly. That's why when that conversation that needs to be had in the aspects of that Knave of Cups, that's when you take that opportunity to do what you truly been saying you needed to be doing. That's when you take this, that aspects of that, this when you start taking that opportunity. Relearning requires me to apply. If I'm truly applying what I'm learning to myself and I'm sitting with it, then when something comes up right after it, it's going to teach me exactly what is needed. For me, earlier on, when I was getting information, my thought process was to keep using an example. I was literally went from the good guy to the evil. I went from the superhero to the villain real fast. Went from superhero to villain. I totally jumped through my fucking shadow, went from superhero to villain. In areas where I was good, I became the villain. In areas where I was the villain, I became the good guy. Still, so naturally, I just reconditioned my space to stay disassociated, stay detached, stay separated from people. People can't get close to me. I still was reacting out the same traumas. Even though I was in a spiritual sense, I still was acting out the same shit. I was still doing the same thing. I still was stuck in that lower aspect of myself. So when you go into this space with yourself now, this is your opportunity based on the decisions that you've been making. If you keep making the decisions based on reconditioning, which means you're trying to go back into that space and you're trying to make it something that it cannot be. You've done everything in that space. You said everything. You said you've done everything. You said these things to yourself. You've done everything but leave. And you keep telling yourself you can't leave. And the thing that's fucking you up is, the thing that's fucking up your heart with that shit is, the reason you're saying that you can't leave is the lie that you originally told yourself. Remember, think about it like this. The way that you go into a space is the way that you go out. One of the most simplest ways the way that you go into a space is the way that you head out. It's the way that you've been doing it. For a long time, you've been using that same way. You've been moving in the aspects of your decisions based on the impulse. Oh my God, I got the feeling from somewhere else. I'm going to go over there. It can be the aspects of that job. So you sat there with that job and you were like, oh my God, I'm going to the new job's going to pay me this, and this. So I'm going to run over there. Okay. And you ran with haste. You ran over there with the same bills. You ran over there with the same suspended license. You ran over there with the same bullshit that you ran from over there with. You didn't sit there and look at none of that. The same habits, the same patterns, the same behaviors. You're not doing none of the work. It will be the same thing over there. You jumped and went across the country to another space in another relationship. But you took the same trauma, the same pain, the same shit from the last 3 relationships. You left from that nigga house or that woman house and you went all the way across to go do the same thing. It's going to be the same shit. Because you keep moving in haste. But inside of that moment, there's been things that are being said to you. That's the key. There's things being said to you inside of that moment that are giving you the access to that cycle. That's how you keep getting into that cycle. There's a reason you keep jumping from relationship to relationship, because you fear facing yourself. And every time that wheel that keep popping up, every time you're looking at everybody else in your space and what they're doing, you're now coming to a point to realize that you've been settling this entire time. Everything that you've wanted to do was based on settling. Your homegirl right now is now pregnant by the nigga that you knew she didn't like. But she had a moment of weakness and now she's pregnant with that nigga baby. She settled. In your mind, you're like, wait, what was I doing? Everybody else having babies and kids. You trying to settle based on unresolved aspects. Why? Are you really dealing with your inner child? Things of that nature. You keep going from shorty to shorty house and shit, not sitting with yourself. Why? Why? Because the relationship with your mother wasn't shit, the relationship with your family members, and there's still a story about your mom, you still trying to do some other things? Why? That's why you keep going through your cycle. That's why you keep going through that cycle. You keep trying to come to this point of harmony. It's going to be a very humbling moment. Right now, you're sitting at a very humbling moment. The way that you used to assess, the way that you used to run, the way that you used to avoid The way that you used to run, avoid, kick back, fight back, hit the fucking shit with that shit and go away from it, you're noticing that shit ain't working no more. You're noticing that prep talk that you were giving yourself is falling flat. That pep talk you used to give yourself all the time, that shit falling flat as fuck. That pep talk of, yo, I'm going to get up and I'm going to shine. I'm going to ascend. You keep avoiding your endarkenment. Remember, there's enlightenment, then there's endarkenment. Some of you are going through your darkening phase. Some of you are going through the darkening phase, and some of you are actually going through your levels of enlightenment. But after every enlightenment phase, when you become aware, there is a darkening period. That is when your shadow is now prevalent. That's when that point inside of your shadow is prevalent. Are you really sitting there dealing with your shadow? Are you sitting with your shadow? Do you understand that shadow work is an ongoing process? Do you understand that your shadow work is synonymous with everything that you do? Your shadow every relationship you came into was based on casting a shadow. Every job that you've ever had was based on casting a shadow. Every argument, every fight, every emotional impulse that you've ever had was based on your shadow. So you just been reacting to your shadow. Now you're inside of that humbling state with yourself. Messenger, your shadow has a message for you. You're now sitting in that space. You have a message for yourself that you haven't been listening to. It seemed like it's getting very, very naggy. You don't like the way it sounds. It's hurting your feelings. Guess what? It's necessary. It's necessary. Exactly what they told you is exactly what you needed to hear. If they told you something that you thought was the most horrible ass shit, that's exactly what the fuck you needed to hear. If they told you some shit if they told you about yourself, and now you're like, oh my God, that's what you needed to hear. It's similar to the conversation that you're not having. It's similar to the conversation that conversation that you refuse to have. It's similar to that conversation that you're refusing to have with yourself. You're sitting there with yourself saying, I'm trying to be a good person. I'm trying to be happy. I'm just trying to find somebody to love me like I love others. Ride or die for me. I love hard. Guess what? You don't love hard. You love from an undisciplined, you're loving from a victim space. That's why you love so hard. It's to cast the shadow on your inadequacy. It's to cast the shadow on your insecurities, to encase the shadow over these aspects of yourself. That's why you love so hard. You're loving from an undisciplined space. You're loving from an undisciplined space. That means the value and the true value, the narrative of that value and the narrative of your worth is not in play. I'm a ride or die. That means you are in an extreme hypervigilant process. I've talked about this before. Most of the times from the trauma that happened to you when you was 11 and 12 years old, back in the day, when you come to of age, let's say when you turn 18, you're in a state, now you're ultimately from that age where you became an adult, you're in a state of hyperadolescence. That's why you always go between the extremes of the extreme caring to the extreme detached and dissociated as fuck. Because you ain't been sitting with yourself really going like, I don't know what emotions are. I've shut my emotions off ever since I was 11 years old. I haven't learned how to regulate my emotions since I was 11 because I got told to shut the fuck up, that nothing really happened to me and I was a liar. Message. So when that motherfucker come upside you and say I'm not going to put up with that type of shit, and you get upset, you can leave, whatever it is. You can leave, fine. It's whatever. I came in this world alone. You're reacting based on through your trauma. That's all you've been doing. You've been reacting through your trauma. You've been reacting through the trauma. Now that you're coming into this space of what are you trying to nurture? That old identity has no more value. That old identity has no more value. The old way of thinking held no more value than the day that you first had it. The way that you've been thinking and been perpetuating yourself inside of your space, all of that shit's falling down. It needs to. Stop trying to rationalize your fall. Stop trying to rationalize you falling. Stop trying to rationalize it and allow it to happen. The worst thing that we do a lot of times that we don't even realize that we do it unconsciously is when we're going through a bunch of shit, we try to rationalize it to push it away from us, to take away accountability. And when we do take the accountability, it's from the victim mentality. So we'll look at the relationship and we'll be like, oh my God, it's my fault. I should have did this, this, and this. Wait, it's not my fault. We go back and forth trying to invalidate them to validate ourselves. We go back and forth with that complex, trying to make ourselves stay within the identity. I feel worthless. This person made me feel worthless. You already had the feelings of being worthless. They made me feel unvaluable with myself and like I wasn't in a good time with myself. You were already in that space. They made me do shit that I was not supposed to do. You need to admit that you use them in that space to give you a sense of feeling so you can do things that you never did before. You got to be honest with yourself. You used them just like they used you. Your job used you just like you used them. That's the way you can start coming to that middle point. That victim mentality that always have you on one end of the extreme. If they did all of this, we would have been together now. What if you weren't meant to be together? What are you learning from the process of all of your relationships all the damn time? All your relationships in the same way. Why? Have you really sat with yourself and asked yourself, why do all my relationships keep ending the same way? We always get to a point where it's an extreme attack. Why? What comes up? I can guarantee you it's always the same narratives that come up. But you're not ready to face those points. Because you created an entire optical illusion that only you can live inside. But then you're asking others to share a world with you? It doesn't make sense now, does it? I can't make you come into my space if you're not on this level, without accepting the level that I'm on. I can't establish something inside of a space if I'm not doing that with myself. So why would I expect someone else to do it? Let me look at my truth. Let me look at the definitions that I keep telling myself. Allow it to fall down. I jumped ahead of the card. Allow it to fall away. It's going to be a beautiful fall. It's beautiful. It's necessary. If it wasn't necessary, it wouldn't be happening. You wouldn't even be able to sit with it if it wasn't supposed to happen. Let it happen. Stop trying to fight it. Stop trying to rationalize it. This too shall pass. Let it. What are you learning from it? Everything on your path is going to be necessary. Everything on your path is being fucking necessary. So what you going to do with it? As always, I desire y'all to be the best. Y'all got me amped today. As always, I desire you to be the fucking best. I want you to understand 3 things. Healing is destructive. You are deserving, but you are not entitled. And this level of honesty is the key to you actually starting to do this work. I'm Papa Lucifer Samdi. You're a cult therapist, spiritual life coach, shamanic guide, all those good things. If you're interested in readings, setting up a consultation, simple guidance call, chart analysis, or you have questions about any of my other services, to book a service, you can hit me in that link that's above in my bio, or you can hit me in my DM, ask a question about others. We can start that dialogue there. Because I ultimately desire you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be fucking great. I don't desire you to be good or desire you to get better. If you feel good, it is an aptitude of you doing the work. I guarantee everything I only guarantee one thing, that my work and my dedication will only be based on your work and your dedication to self. Which means if you're not going to fight for yourself, don't expect me to do it. The hell? I want you to be honest with yourself. Nobody is going to put in more than you put into yourself. Nobody. And since we're so used to everybody putting more into us than ourselves, I want you to think about this. You'll accept any price. You'll accept any price for somebody to put in more work to you than you willing to put into you. You'll go pay $3,000 for somebody to do all the work for you and give you the results. But you will be no further ahead than the child that went in there and picked up and looked at the YouTube channel and was like, you know what? I'm going to do this my damn self. You have a choice. Every time you getting up, you got a choice. This right here was your ending. From this point is the beginning. Once you I want you to hold that thought in your mind. Every time you come to a point like right now, this is the ending. From this point is your beginning. That's where you have your new set of choices, new options, and realizing that the obstacle and the opportunity, they come in the same box. They two sides of that same coin. The opportunity, the obstacle, they're in the same box. So it ain't the opportunity or the obstacle that you got to pay attention to. It's that glamour that you keep putting up. Why you keep going to that? But I used to be. But yeah. I'm going to head out. I appreciate y'all for stopping through. I got a choice. I have a choice. Either I'm going to be 100% authentic with myself or I'm not. Thank you. Much gratitude for you accepting this. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here. If you have questions, anything of that nature, hit me up in the inbox. Let you know right now, my inbox is 24 hours. My inbox is 24 hours. My email link is 24 hours. I'm not. But one of the biggest things that I tell people, no problem. One of the biggest things that I tell people is you got to get out of that mentality of feeling like you got to answer everybody. That's one of the things that's what I'm going to end with. I felt like I had to answer everybody. I remember in the beginning, I'm saving up all fucking night, answering everybody's messages. No. And then I'm wondering why I'm drained. Because I'm allowing people into my energetic space. I'm not setting any boundaries. I'm still feeding off of the old narrative of myself of being for everybody before being for myself. Me being for myself means to set boundary. My inbox is 24 hours. You can hit me. I don't know where the fuck my father just came through because my whole accent just changed. My inbox is open 24 hours. You can go in there 24 hours a day, leave a message. If I don't answer, you will get an answer from me. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. You will get a reply from me after 10 a.m. I'm letting you know that now because I do not look at my phone. I don't do any messaging, any messages or anything of that nature until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Because between 4 a.m. when I wake up, between 4 and 5 a.m. when I wake up to about 7 to 8:30, that's Lucifer time. That's me getting myself ready for the day. That's charging myself and assessing myself. And it took a hell of a lot of work to get to that point to be able to do it. But it's important. Because how can I teach someone how to keep their energy in balance if I'm not doing it? How can I give somebody the information and the keys and guide people if I'm not doing it first? That's what I mean by that dedication. My dedication for me is going to be reflected in the work, the space shit that I've created. And your dedication on you is going to be how you connect to the shit that we're going to create. But again, I thank you for allowing me into your energy. Allow me into your space. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Lucifer. L to the U. Yeah. But, yeah. Again, services, bookings, hit the link. Questions, bookings, hit the link. Questions, hit the link. Hit me up. 24 hours. Let's get fucking deeper. I love you. We love us. Ashe.